Australia versus Canada comparison by me. Population distribution. Australia versus Canada's population 1960 to 2010. As you can see, Canada has a larger population and a faster growth. The population seems to be pretty stable for both countries, except between 1980 and 1985 for Canada, as you can see here, where it seems to slow down. The baby boom, which happened after the World War II, happened for many reasons. One of the reasons is the Green Revolution, which is when crops were more easily grown and farmers could produce more food. Also, there's less restraints because there was no more war. Also, the economy was more stable. There was also population spikes for Canada in 1970 1975, 1985 to 1989, and 2006 and 2009. But those are very small increases, so you can't really see in this graph. And there are also increases in Australia in 1967 to 1969, 1970 to 1971, 1973 to 1974, and 2004 to 2008. Population density and distribution. Population distribution and density, Canada. As you can see, the population is very dense around the border, and it's very sparse here. This may look very linear, but actually it's very clustered in the cities, as you can see here. Montreal, Toronto, and Hamilton are very, very populated, with more than 390 people per square mile, and more than 150 people per square kilometer. And everyone's very focused around the border, and very sparse up north and in the center. Population distribution and density, Australia. As you can see, the population is mainly focused around the coast and also near Melbourne and Sydney, but it's still not nearly as dense as where Canada is near the border. The world map. As you can see, this is Canada in the top left corner, and as you can see, this is Australia in the top right, bottom right corner. And the equator goes down the center here. What is the area of both countries? The area of Australia is 7,741,000 kilometers squared, while the area of Canada is 9,984,670 kilometers squared. This is approximate, not exact. So Canada's usable land. Most of Canada's land is usable, except the Rocky Mountains in BC. So about 80% of Canada is usable, mainly because it has a lot of snowy areas, like the mountains BC. And here's a mountain range. I'm not sure if it's in Canada or not. Most of Canada is inhabited, especially near the border. As I said before, most of Canada is inhabited, and it's inhabitable. Only 5% of Canada is arable. Arable land is land that can be used to grow crops. So this means any kind of crop, so wheat, anything. And only 5% of Canada is. I think the exact statistic is 4.57% of Canada. As you see, this is the area of Canada again. And also 9% of Canada is water, and coincidentally, Canada has 9% of the world's renewable water supply, which I thought was interesting. Australia is the smallest, flattest, lowest, and driest continent with 99% land and 1% water, whereas Canada has 9% water and 91% land. The highest point is Mount Kosciuszko at 2,234 meters, and its lowest point is Lake Erie at -15 meters. Its longest river is the Murray River. The southwest part of Australia is moist and fertile/arable, but the rest is very dry. As you can see, the dry climate may seem very bad, but it has an exclusive and unique group of plants. As you see here, it's very flat, so much of Australia is usable. But since it's very deserty, about 60% is. How is it used? So this is a graph I found on Google. So this is conservation is more than half, so any kind of forest and stuff like that. And minimal use is other livestock raising, so farms and so any kind of poultry, chickens, cows, pigs, you name it. And forestry, so wood resources and stuff like that, and dryland agriculture, as I said before, different agriculture. And built environment would be like cities and factories and stuff like that. Here's land use in Canada. It's not exactly the same, but it's a different kind of map. So as you can see, this picture shows what different areas produce. So as you can see over here, there's wheat, and there's lots of mining going on here, and also oil. There's lots of minerals up here as well. So if you could pause this video and you can just study this. History. So Canada, as you can see, that's a native headdress. They weren't really treated very well by Europeans. I'll explain that a little bit later. They used the land very well, so they grew crops and stuff like that, but they weren't as developed as Europeans. They didn't have as advanced tools and stuff. It is speculated that they first came to North America from Asia when a section of the ocean was frozen to create an ice bridge. So basically they crossed the ocean on an ice bridge, but there also could have been a segment of land that hadn't been there before because of the higher water levels and lower water levels. They're also a major part of the fur trade because they hunted the furs and they knew how to, so they gave the Europeans the fur in exchange for tools and other techniques that Europeans might have. And most of the groups of natives were nomads, so they traveled with food, and also they didn't really settle in one place. That's why natives use teepees, because they're very portable. So as I said before, I'll come back to this point. Basically, what happened? The Europeans, they first showed peace and stuff, but then afterwards they eventually became more hostile and wanted to take over the natives' land. So land. Much of the prairies in Ontario was used for farming and agriculture, even after Europeans came, and many Aboriginal people hunted animals like buffalo, beaver, fox, and for the beavers for their pelts and buffalo for their food and stuff. And also the natives used every single part of the animal. For example, the buffalo hide would be used for teepees and clothes, and the meat would be used for food, and the bones and the horns would be used for tools, and etc. And later on, the natives would trade fur with the Europeans, such as beaver pelts, because they were in very high demand in Europe. Much of the prairies in Ontario was used for farming and agriculture, as I said before. That's a repeated point. Australia. So indigenous people are basically the Aboriginal people of Australia. They were in Australia from 40 to 60,000 years ago, but it's possible that they were here from up to 100,000. They were in Australia up to 100,000 years ago. A Dutch ship led by Willem Jans Zoon arrived at Australia, and they at first wanted peace and friendship, just like the Europeans did, the British did with the North American natives. But eventually they claimed it as New Holland around 1774, and that led to a lot of violence and conflict. And also they introduced many diseases, such as smallpox, which the natives of Australia couldn't handle because their immune systems couldn't recognize it. But then the fighting ended around 1901 when Australia's Confederation happened. And land. It's very similar to North American natives. They use their land to grow lots of food like yams, as you can see. This is a picture of yams. The Aboriginals maintained their land for over 40,000 years, which means they're very successful. So if they can maintain their land and use the resources over and over again, that means they're probably pretty successful. Australia is also home to many exclusive and rare plants, as I explained before, because of its unique and dry climate. And similarities. Here's a chart I made to show the similarities. So treatment. They were both treated very badly. At first they were treated well, but then eventually the settlers wanted more land, and they became more aggressive. And the land, they're both very similar because both natives used the land as much as they could, and they weren't very developed in technology and tools. And both natives were the first, hence the name native, to the land. Interesting facts. Canada's capital, Ottawa, is the second coldest capital in the world, and 1/10 of the world's forests are located in Canada. So that means that's very cool, because that means a lot of the forests are located in Canada, which means Canada is a major wood exporter. Canada has the fourth lowest population density in the world, with about 3.7 people per square kilometer. This is also very interesting because Canada is a very big country with a low population, whereas other countries such as India and China are smaller countries but with a very large population. And 81% of the population lives in cities. This means Canada's cities are very clustered and dense, whereas their rural and more suburban areas are a little bit more spread out and linear. And Canada's economy is 10th in the world. due to from measuring through GPD. Canada is the St. Lawrence Iroquois word for village, which evolved into Canada, the name we have now, Canada. The life expectancy for an average Canadian is about 81.16 years, which is the 8th highest in the world, which is pretty cool. The Australian Alps gets more snow than Switzerland. This is very interesting because Switzerland is known to have lots of snow and known for their Alps, but as you can see, the Australian Alps get more snow. Apparently, the first European settlers in Australia drank more alcohol per person than any other group recorded in history. This is also very, very interesting because, well, it's just an interesting fact. It has nothing to do with geography. Australia has the lowest population density in the world, as approximately 2.8 people per square kilometer. This is very similar to the point I have over here about Canada. That means 2.8 people per square kilometer. That's comparing to some countries with very high densities, like up to 200 people per square kilometer. That's very interesting. But lots of the population, as you saw before, is located along the coast. Australia is the only continent with no active volcanoes, that's very interesting because all the other continents have active volcanoes except for Australia. Australia's economy is 13th in the world. As I said before, the GDP total. GDPS. Kangaroo and Aborigine, which is the Aboriginal language of Australia, means I don't understand what you're saying. I find this very interesting, so I'm not sure if this is true, but maybe the settlers thought kangaroos were the animal, where maybe the settlers thought the Aboriginals were saying the animal kangaroo instead of they're not sure what they're saying, but now we know. Australia is currently the most obese country in the world, beating out the USA by 1%. That's actually also very interesting because USA 25% of the population is obese versus the 26% of Australia. This says a lot about the population. Well, that small group of population, if they beat the US out by 1%. Conclusion. Here's some things to think about. How can this help us in the future? Well, knowing all this information, it can help governments learn more about the population and where they want to live. And it also shows us which countries are most likely to grow bigger in economy and population and other things. Why is this important to know about? Same reason as before, this can help us a lot in the future, and also being educated is always better than not. Also, it's very good to know about this because you can make, if say you're going to immigrate to a different country, you can make very informed decisions if you want to where you want to move, and what could have happened differently in history that would affect us positively. So I'm talking about the natives. I think maybe if the natives were treated better, because it's their land and they were mistreated. This is not really a big overall question, but this is very important to think about because if the natives were treated better, that would be better for all of us because right now a lot of the natives are being mistreated, and actually one group of natives in Australia are completely wiped out. There's no genetic evidence of them even existing, even though they